So if we only report the center of measure, we only have a single number, whether we're using the median or the mean, and that's not going to be enough information to really tell us what's going on with the distribution. So we also want to measure what we call the spread. And the simplest way would just be to give what we call the range, the minimum value to the maximum value. But again, that doesn't tell us a whole lot about where the data falls within the range. So one way that we do this is with what we call the 5-number summary, or we break the data into quartiles, into the minimum, the maximum, and then we chop it in half with the median, and then we take each half and chop those in half to get the quartiles, what we call the quartiles. And we use the notation Q1 and Q3 for the first and the third quartiles. The median would basically be Q2, the second quartile, but we don't use that terminology for it. We call it the median. So your first quartile is the value where 25% of the data lies between the min and Q1. And then the median, you have 50% of the data above and below the median. And then in the third quartile, you have 3/4 or 75% of the data below the third quartile, 25% above, between Q3 and the max. And we have one measure that we're going to use later to find whether or not numbers are outliers. We're going to use this thing called the 1.5 times the IQR rule. The IQR is Q3 minus Q1, the difference between the upper and the lower quartile, the third and the first quartile. When we look at box plots, we're going to see that that's the width of the center box, how spread out the middle half of the data are. We use that measure sometimes instead of just doing the max minus the min because it throws out the outliers. We're just looking at the middle of the data. And so that's the 5-number summary if we use the minimum, Q1, the median, Q3, and the maximum. And if we make a picture of those things, it's what's called a box plot, which is what we're going to do next. So I'm going to show you how to do this on the calculator as well. It's pretty easy to draw a box plot by hand once you find the numbers, but you have to find the numbers, and the easiest way for us to do that is to use our Texas Instruments calculator or other software. So this example says give the 5-number summary and draw a box plot for the exam scores. So we have this set of exam scores that we've looked at in some other examples. I have the result here, so this is what a box plot looks like. You can make them vertically or horizontally, either way. The default, I made this one with GeoGebra, it does them horizontally like this. So you need one number line. Okay? It's for one variable data, so you need one number line. This number line is really important because in the box plot I can see that this thing is skewed left because it's longer on the left side than it is on the right. And I'm only going to be able to see that if I have an accurate scale under it here. So you start with a scale based on your data. Look at your minimum and your maximum and make sure you cover all those and pick a good scale. So for these grades I went from, you can see here, from about 20 to 100 counting by tens. And then you find the 5-number summary and you put, if you're doing it horizontally like this, you do little vertical lines at each of the 5 numbers. You got the min, and then above wherever Q1 is for this data, it turns out to be 56.5. So at 56.5, I approximate that. Of course, the computer does it very accurately. But put my vertical line there, and then one at the median, one at Q3, and one at the max. So at each of the 5 numbers from the 5-number summary, we'd put little vertical dashes here. And then we draw this central box around the middle half from Q1 to Q3, which will have the median somewhere inside. And then on the end, we draw what we call whiskers. Sometimes this is called a box and whisker plot. So you just extend from the box out to the max and the min. So that's what a box plot looks like. So on the calculator here, we would have to enter the data. So stat, edit. I've already got them in here from doing this example previously, or working with this data previously. Let me just double check. Yeah, I think I've got them all. It's the same numbers from a different example. They weren't ordered. These are in order here, but I've already got them typed in. But you hit stat, edit, and type them all in. Okay, we'll see in a minute if I get the same numbers here. So for the 5-number summary, you can do stat. Once you've entered them in, go over to calc, do stat, and go to calc and run the one variable stats like we did to get the mean and the median. That'll give you the 5-number summary. So again, if you don't get this menu and you use L1, just hit enter and it'll run it for you. Here you can tell it where the list is. It's in L1, leave frequency alone, calculate, and scroll down and we've got our 5-number summary. So a min of 36, Q1 56.5, a median of 74, Q3 84.5, and a max of 92. So I did indeed have the correct data in there. So you could draw the box plot by hand using those numbers, or if you want to do it on your calculator, I'm going to hit y equals, make sure my graph is clear, and then do second and y equals. Go into plot 1, make sure it's turned on, go down to the type and click forward until you get to the box plots. Okay? There's actually two box plots here. There's one with outliers and one without outliers. I always start with the one that doesn't have the little extra dots. This doesn't look for outliers, it just makes the box plot using the data, which is what I've done here. So I select that, hit enter, go down to the X list, make sure it's where you put the data. I put it in L1, so that's good. Again, if it's not the list where you put the data, do second and like 1 to do L1. If you wanted to use L2 or L3 or any other list, that's fine. You just give it the name of where you put it. Leave frequency at 1. We're not using frequency lists in this class. If you have a color version, you can pick your color. We could do zoom and number 9. That's a zoom stat. That'll always make sure that it fits in the picture. So there's a box plot. It picked the scale for me. We could do window and do it ourselves. You can see what it did there. I could do like I have on the picture here, 20 to 100 by 10s. It did use a scale of 10. The y-axis doesn't really matter. It'll fit it somewhere in the screen when you do it there. Then once you have the box plot, if you hit trace, you can actually read the 5-number summary. You can bounce around with the arrows and read the 5-number summary. So that would be another way, other than running one variable stats, to actually get the 5-number summary out of the calculator. You could make the box plot and then read it off. Let me show you. If you do the other one, we're going to talk about this thing called the 1.5 times IQR rule. There's a way to determine whether or not numbers are outliers. That's what this one will do, and it'll plot extra points, the outliers, as single dots, and then do the rest of the data as a box plot. There's no outliers in this data, I don't believe. So if I do the graph with it, I'm going to get the exact same picture. Okay? But I'll show you if I do stat, edit, and go down and add a 0 into my data, which would be an outlier. I need to change the window so you can actually see it here. It's at 0, so I need to back up. Let's see, how about negative 10 to 100? And you can't see it because of the symbol. I'm going to choose the little box. So for this one, if you pick the one that has the little dots, it'll plot the outliers as dots or points, and it'll use whatever symbol you pick. You're only going to be able to see it probably if I pick the square there. Okay. Yeah, and there you can see that it did a box plot with all the other data, but the 0 was an outlier, and it just plotted it back here as a single point. Okay. So that's the difference. If I went in, let me do one more time here. With the 0 in there, if I chose the one that didn't have the little outlier in the picture, it would just do a box plot with all the data, and you'd see it would extend and now have a min of 0. Okay? So pick the one with the extra dots if you're wanting to determine whether or not they're outliers and plot those separately. Otherwise, use the one that doesn't have the little dots. And typically, we don't use the one with the outliers for the examples we're doing in here. And so just to summarize, if you take the 5-number summary and basically make a picture of that, that's what we call a box plot. So you have to set up a number line, draw and label a number line that includes the range of the distribution, make sure it's covering from your minimum to your maximum, pick a good scale. I would say you go in, what I do first is go in and make the lines at each of the 5 numbers and then draw the central box from Q1 to Q3, which would contain the median inside the central box. And then you extend your whiskers from the ends of the central box to the min and the max.